to meet people who carried a notebook full of plans, sketches, wishes, and beautifully written intentions. And they would flip through those pages with pride, as if the ink itself guaranteed a future. But I learned early that a decorated wish is still a wish. A plan isn't real until it starts reshaping the person who wrote it. It's an amazing thing. Most people believe they have planned simply because they wrote something down. They believe the moment the pen touched the paper, the universe stood to attention. But writing is only the invitation. Preparation is the acceptance. Discipline is the proof. I've met men and women who could talk for hours about what they were going to do. They described their future home, their future income, their future habits. And while listening, a quiet question always formed. What has actually begun? Not spoken, not imagined, begun. Because there's a world of difference between a picture of a garden and a patch of soil under cultivation. One is imagination, the other is commitment. A plan that hasn't been prepared for is nothing more than a hopeful decoration. People love to decorate hope. They polish it, they admire it, they even protect it, but they rarely work it. And that's where the trouble starts. If a plan doesn't demand anything from you, it won't give anything back. I remember a time in my early years when I would sit and daydream about the life I wanted. I believed that if the picture was vivid enough, things would shift by themselves. But life doesn't respond to casual wishes. Life responds to deliberate effort. And until that truth became real, every plan I laid out collapsed under its own emptiness. The plan has to ask something of you. It has to require strength you haven't used yet, skills you haven't mastered yet, habits you haven't built yet. If it doesn't stretch you, it can't change you. And if it can't change you, it can't change your life. So when people tell me they've made a plan, the first thought that runs through my mind is simple. Has the work begun inside? Because the moment you pick up a plan, the plan picks up you. It starts demanding earlier mornings, harder questions, fewer excuses. It invites you to trade comfort for progress. And most people are not ready for that trade. That's why so many plans die before they even take their first breath. Not because they were bad plans, but because the person holding them wanted the celebration without the sacrifice. They wanted the result without the requirement. They mistook the illusion of planning for the reality of preparation. A plan isn't a promise. A plan is a test. And the first test is simple. Will you become the kind of person who can carry it? Most never get past that point. They fall in love with the idea of change, but resist the cost of change. And until that shifts, until the plan becomes more than a scribble, more than a wish, nothing happens. The illusion of planning is comfortable. The reality of planning is demanding. And that's where the journey truly begins. I learned long ago that you can't build a tall house on a cracked foundation. Yet that's exactly what most people try to do when they make a plan. They start with hope instead of truth. And hope without honesty becomes a very fragile thing. One of the toughest conversations a person can have is the one held in front of the mirror. Not the hurried glance before rushing out the door, but the quiet inventory where you sit with your habits, your skills, your strengths, and your shortcomings. Most people avoid that meeting. They would rather assume they're ready than discover they're not. But assumptions make poor building materials. I used to assume I was more disciplined than I was. I assumed I had good habits simply because I liked good ideas. I assumed I was prepared simply because I felt eager. And then life delivered the bill. A plan built on imagination collapses the moment reality pushes back. Success begins with truth. Not the kind you announce to others, but the kind you whisper to yourself. The truth about how you're using your time. The truth about the habits you've allowed to drift. The truth about the resources you have and the ones you still need. Without that truth, a plan isn't a plan at all. It's a polite denial. People often rush into action so they don't have to face that honesty. They'd rather run blind than slow down and see clearly. But blindness is expensive. It costs time, energy, and sometimes years of trying to fix something that should never have been built in the first place. Whenever somebody tells me they're ready for the next level, a quiet question rises inside. Ready according to whom? Ready according to excitement or ready according to evidence? Two very different assessments. Excitement might give you the spark, but evidence tells you if you have the fuel. I've watched folks start a new venture with tremendous enthusiasm, and within weeks the cracks appear. Not because the dream was wrong, but because the preparation was. They skipped the self-evaluation. They skipped the inventory. They skipped the truth. And without the truth, they had no real starting point. See, you can't fix what you refuse to face. And you can't grow from what you pretend to be. A plan must sit on the solid ground of honesty. Honest about what you know. Honest about what you don't know. Honest about whether you're disciplined or merely optimistic. When you get that part right, even a modest plan becomes powerful. Honest evaluation isn't punishment. It's alignment. It brings your expectations in line with your reality and then invites you to bridge the gap. That's where strength is built. That's where maturity begins. And that's where most people stumble because truth demands humility before it offers progress. The moment you face yourself honestly, your plan changes shape. It gets cleaner, simpler, stronger. It matches who you are and points toward who you must become. And that kind of plan, grounded in truth, has a much better chance of surviving the journey ahead. Most plans fail before they begin because people skip this simple but painful step. They would rather guess than measure. But a guess can't take you where the truth can. I've sat with people who had magnificent plans, detailed, organized, even impressive to look at. But the moment life pushed back, the whole thing crumbled like paper in the rain. Not because the plan was wrong, but because the reason behind it was too weak to hold it together. A plan without a powerful why is like a car without an engine. It might look good parked in the driveway, but it won't take you anywhere. The why is what keeps you moving when the novelty fades and the obstacles show up. And obstacles always show up. They never miss an appointment. I remember starting out, eager for progress, hungry for success, but not deeply connected to the reasons behind it all. When the first difficulties appeared, enthusiasm vanished. The late nights felt heavier. The early mornings felt colder. And little by little, the plan slowed to a halt. Not because the goal changed, but because the reason wasn't strong enough to pull me through the discomfort. Convenience can get you started, but conviction is what keeps you going. Most people build their plans around convenience. They work when it feels good. They adjust the schedule when it gets uncomfortable. They negotiate with themselves the moment sacrifice enters the room. And a plan built on convenience collapses the first time effort becomes inconvenient. The why must be bigger than the work. It must be strong enough to survive boredom, frustration, and delay. As the years went by, I learned that when the reason becomes powerful, the plan becomes durable. When the reason becomes personal, the plan becomes unstoppable. I once spoke with a young man who wanted to change his financial life. He had charts, timelines, and all the enthusiasm in the world. But nothing in his voice connected that future with something meaningful. And sure enough, the first setback scattered his commitment. Later, he admitted that the plan was exciting, but the reason was vague. He hadn't built a bridge between the work and the life he truly wanted. Purpose creates that bridge. It gives meaning to repetition. It gives dignity to discipline. It turns effort into investment. A strong why doesn't remove the obstacles. It simply changes how you face them. With a weak reason, every delay feels like a sign to quit. With a strong reason, every delay feels like a challenge to overcome. And challenges, when met with purpose, become fuel. People often say they want change, but what they really want is comfort wrapped in progress. And comfort never built a plan that lasted. Progress demands a deeper foundation. It demands a reason you can lean on when the whole world seems to lean against you. Whenever a plan begins to wobble, the first place to look is the why. If the reason is shallow, the first gust of adversity blows it over. But if the reason is deep, if it touches your pride, your future, your family, your identity, then the storms don't break you. They strengthen you. That's the power of a true why. It makes discipline easier. It makes decisions clearer. It makes commitment longer. And without it, even the best plan is just a wish, dressed in structure. Most plans fail before they begin because the reason behind them isn't strong enough to carry the weight ahead. Build the why first, and the plan finally has something to stand on. I've met a lot of people who told me they were aiming to do better, and I would wait for the rest of the sentence. Better at what? Better by when? Better according to which measurement? But the rest of the sentence never came. Just better. And that single foggy word has destroyed more plans than failure ever has. A vague goal is like trying to hit a target you refuse to hang on the wall. You draw the bow, you pull the string, but there's nothing to aim at. And when there's nothing to aim at, every effort feels wasted. You can't build momentum toward a cloud. You need something solid, specific, measurable, something your mind can lock onto and your discipline can serve. I used to tell myself I'd get around to things someday. Someday I'd get in shape. Someday I'd learn more. Someday I'd save more. But someday is a shy little word. It always hides behind the calendar. It never walks out onto a specific date. And as long as a goal hides behind someday, the plan that depends on it never truly starts. People often confuse hope with clarity. Hope says it will get better. Clarity says here's how and here's when. And life responds to clarity far better than it responds to hope. I remember sitting at my kitchen table years ago, reviewing my life and realizing how many goals I had allowed to drift simply because they weren't defined. I wanted change, but I had never carved out the shape of that change. I had a direction, but not a destination. And a direction without a destination becomes a loop. You walk, you work, you try, but you never arrive. The moment I began to assign dates, numbers, and clear outcomes, everything changed. My energy changed. My attitude changed. Even my mornings changed. Suddenly, the plan wasn't just an idea floating above my head. It was a commitment staring back at me. And commitments have a way of reshaping behavior. When you say you want a better income, that's noble. But when you decide the figure, the timeline, and the actions required, now the mind wakes up. Now the calendar gets involved. Now your habits begin to shift. Vague goals whisper. Clear goals command. And when a plan includes empty deadlines, deadlines that exist only as decorations, nothing moves. A real deadline has weight. It carries consequence. It taps you on the shoulder in the morning and asks how the progress is coming. It forces you to decide whether today will be used well or wasted gently. Most plans fail not because the person lacked talent or opportunity, but because the destination was never defined. You can't arrive where you haven't described, and you can't finish something that never had a finish line. So if a plan feels weak, If motivation feels scattered, there's a good chance the goal isn't sharp enough to cut through distraction. Sharpen the goal, and suddenly the plan gathers strength. Set the date, and suddenly the steps line up. Define what done looks like, and suddenly the journey becomes clearer than it has ever been. Vagueness drains energy. Specificity creates it. And the people who learn that difference give their plans something most people never give theirs: a chance. I learned early that a plan doesn't succeed on the day you write it. It succeeds on the quiet mornings when no one is watching, when the world is still, and you're deciding whether to honor the promise you made to yourself. A plan is shaped in those small hours, long before the results ever appear. Most people want to change their life without changing their day. They want transformation without adjustment. They want progress without new patterns. But life doesn't work like that. Life asks a simple question: what are you willing to do today that proves you're serious about tomorrow? I used to admire big ideas, grand plans, bold visions, sweeping changes. But the older I got, the more I realized that big ideas collapse under the weight of weak habits. A person can be inspired on Saturday night and completely defeated by Monday morning, simply because the routine didn't match the dream. Your daily habits tell the truth long before your words do. If someone says they want to be healthier, the pantry reveals the truth. If they say they want to build wealth, their calendar reveals the truth. If they say they want to grow, the books they read reveal the truth. The day always confesses what the plan pretends to be. I remember reviewing my own routine in those early years and discovering that my habits were working against me. Not dramatically, just quietly. Little delays, little excuses, little permissions I granted myself in the moment, not realizing how they accumulated into a pattern. And patterns always win. They either push you forward or pull you down, but they always win. So I made a decision. If the plan was going to change my life, the day had to change first. Not in a dramatic sweep, but steadily, consistently. A new hour here, a better choice there. A small discipline repeated until it became automatic. And one day I realized something remarkable. The results began taking care of themselves once the habits took over. Success is not an event. It's a rhythm. It's what happens when simple disciplines are repeated long enough to create momentum. And momentum is a powerful friend. Momentum makes the hard days easier and the easy days count for more. But most people never experience that momentum because they never build the habits that create it. They build excitement instead. And excitement is a wonderful spark, but it burns out fast. Habits keep the fire alive after the spark is gone. When someone tells me their plan isn't working, the first place my mind goes is not the goal. It's the day. What are they doing every morning, every evening, every week? Are they reinforcing the plan or eroding it? Because a plan doesn't fail suddenly. It fails gradually in the small decisions that seem harmless, but compound over time. You don't need a dramatic breakthrough to change your life. You need a handful of small behaviors practiced faithfully. You need a routine that quietly supports the future you're trying to build. If the habits are right, the plan breathes. If the habits are wrong, the plan suffocates. It's as simple and as difficult as that. I've watched people turn a simple idea into a 12-page blueprint with charts, diagrams, color codes, and enough moving parts to confuse an engineer. And they would hand it to me with pride, expecting applause. But the moment I saw all that complexity, a quiet thought rose inside. This plan may never get off the ground. Complexity has a strange way of making people feel productive while keeping them perfectly stuck. The more elaborate the plan, the harder it becomes to start. And if you can't start, you certainly can't finish. A complicated plan might impress your friends, but a simple plan is what changes your life. When I was younger, I used to assume that if something was important, it had to be complicated. Important meant intricate. Important meant sophisticated. But life has a way of teaching humility. I discovered that complexity doesn't guarantee progress. It often prevents it. Complexity slows the feet and clouds the mind. Simplicity, on the other hand, builds momentum. It gives you something to act on today, not someday. It strips away the unnecessary until only the essential remains. And when the essential stands alone, the path becomes clear. Not always easy, but clear. I remember refining my own routines. I kept adding steps, layering tasks, designing sequences. It looked impressive on paper, but every morning I felt resistance, not from the work, but from the weight of it all. There were too many steps to begin, too many rules to follow. It was a tower built with no doorway. So one day I took the whole thing apart. I asked myself a simple question. What are the few actions that truly matter? Not the decorative ones, not the impressive ones, the ones that actually move the needle. And once I found those, the plan became lighter, faster, and far more effective. Most people overcomplicate their plans because complexity feels safer. If the plan is complicated, they don't have to start yet. They can keep improving it, polishing it, revising it. Complexity becomes a shield that protects them from the discomfort of action. But the shield eventually becomes a cage. A plan should inspire action, not analysis paralysis. If you need an instruction manual just to get through the first day, something has gone wrong. The purpose of a plan is not to showcase intelligence. The purpose is to create progress. And progress loves simplicity. When the path is simple, the mind relaxes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop stalling. You stop overthinking. Instead, you execute. You follow through. You build consistency. And consistency, even in small amounts, always outperforms complexity that never gets implemented. I've met people who said they failed because the plan wasn't sophisticated enough. But the truth is usually the opposite. They failed because they never built momentum. And they never built momentum because the plan had too many moving parts, too many steps, too many layers between intention and action. Success doesn't come from dazzling complexity. It comes from disciplined simplicity. Simple steps repeated until the extraordinary appears. If you want your plan to survive, make it clear, make it practical, make it actionable, not impressive, effective. Because when the plan is simple, starting becomes easier. And when starting becomes easier, finishing becomes possible. One of the greatest dangers in planning is drift. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet drift that happens when days go by without any honest review. You intend to stay on track. You believe you're moving forward, but slowly, almost invisibly, the plan slips out of alignment. And by the time you notice, you've wandered far from where you meant to be. I've always said that without a system for accountability, the mind becomes a marvelous storyteller. It creates explanations, justifications, even illusions of progress. It celebrates effort instead of measuring results. And effort, while noble, is not the same as achievement. A person can be very busy and move nowhere at all. I remember a time when I felt certain I was advancing quickly. I was working long hours, having important conversations, filling my calendar. But one evening, I sat down and took a hard look at the numbers, the outcomes, the actual movement toward my goals. And the truth startled me. All that activity had scattered, not compounded. Without review, I had confused motion with direction. A plan needs checkpoints, not to punish you, but to guide you. A pilot doesn't wait until the plane is off course by 200 miles before checking the instruments. He checks constantly, adjusting subtly, steering steadily. And because of that discipline, he lands exactly where he intended. A plan requires the same attention. Most people don't track. They react. They wait until something goes wrong before looking back to see what happened. But by then, trouble has already accumulated. Momentum has already weakened. Confidence has already declined. Accountability prevents that slow erosion. I've seen people design elaborate plans, but leave out the simplest question. How will you know it's working? Not how will you feel, but how will you know? Feelings fluctuate. Results tell the truth. And the truth, reviewed consistently, has the power to correct your course before the drift becomes dangerous. Some avoid accountability because they fear what they might discover. They fear the numbers will reveal inconsistency, or the calendar will show wasted time, or the habits will expose a lack of commitment. But facing that truth early is far easier than facing the consequences later. I learned that accountability isn't a burden. It's a lifeline. It keeps you alert. It keeps you honest. It keeps the plan alive. When you measure your progress, even the smallest improvement becomes a victory. And those little victories add strength to the spirit. They encourage you to keep going. Without accountability, the plan fades into memory. You remember it vaguely, like a promise made at a dinner party. You think about it now and then, but nothing anchors it to daily behavior. And before long, you find yourself explaining why it didn't work, as if the outcome were a mystery. But it's never a mystery. A plan without measurement becomes imagination. A plan with consistent measurement becomes reality. If you want your plan to last, give it the gift most people never give theirs: a system for review. A way to check the numbers, evaluate the actions, adjust the course. Not once a year, not once a month. Regularly enough the drift never has the chance to take root. Because when you track your progress, the plan doesn't just guide you. It accompanies you. And that companionship is what keeps you moving toward the life you intended to build. I've watched people start a new plan with fireworks in their eyes, excitement so high it could lift a balloon. And for a few days, maybe a week, the energy carries them. But then something very predictable happens. The excitement fades. The early enthusiasm softens, and the ordinary feelings of life return: fatigue, frustration, doubt, impatience. And without discipline to take the wheel, the plan quietly drives itself into the ditch. Emotion is a wonderful servant, but a terrible driver. It was designed to give signals, not directions. If you let emotion set the course, you'll spend your days chasing highs and avoiding lows, never building the consistency that success requires. I used to rely heavily on inspiration. I thought if I could stay motivated, I could stay on track. But motivation is like the weather. It changes without warning. One cloudy morning and the whole plan feels heavier than it did the day before. And if feelings decide whether you show up, the plan won't survive long enough to bear fruit. There were mornings when I didn't feel like working, evenings when I didn't feel like studying, days when I didn't feel like making the calls or keeping the promises. And in those moments, I learned something vital. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when the mood has left the room. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. Discipline asks who you intend to become. It doesn't negotiate with temporary discomfort because it has its eyes on permanent change. A disciplined person can outlast a motivated person every time. Because discipline doesn't require the emotional sunshine that motivation depends on. I once knew a man who had a new plan every month. Big dreams, big goals, big excitement. But the excitement evaporated at the first sign of resistance. A missed day, a slow week, a discouraging result. And he'd scrap the whole plan for a new one that felt more exciting. But it wasn't the plan that failed. It was his emotional management. When frustration rises, most people step back. When boredom arrives, they drift. When doubt whispers, they slow down. But these emotions aren't signals to quit. They're simply milestones on the journey. Every worthwhile plan has days of grind, days of confusion, days when the work feels bigger than the reward. That's normal. What matters is who's driving, your discipline or your emotion. I began to appreciate the quiet power of steady temperament, not ignoring emotion, but not handing it the keys either. When excitement came, I welcomed it. When frustration came, I acknowledged it. But the plan stayed the plan. The work stayed the work. And the days kept building one on top of another. Emotion may start the engine, but discipline keeps the car on the road. A plan grounded in emotional waves will rise and fall like the tide. But a plan grounded in steady practice will move forward even when the skies turn gray. Most plans fail before they begin because people assume excitement will stay. It won't, but discipline can stay. And when discipline stays, progress stays. The real magic isn't in feeling good. It's in staying consistent when you don't. That's when the plan starts shaping you. Adjust the path, again and again, as often as needed. Not from panic, but from wisdom. Adjustment is not a detour. It's part of the road. Most plans fail before they begin because their creator treats the first draft as final. But the first draft is nothing more than a starting point. The real plan emerges through testing, learning, refining, and adapting. That's how progress is built, one thoughtful adjustment at a time. After all the years I've spent studying success, teaching it, applying it, and watching others pursue it, I discovered something a bit surprising. The plan itself is never the hero. The plan is important, of course. It gives structure, direction, and possibility. But the plan is only the start. The real story is the person you become while following it. I used to think that if I could design the perfect plan, success would be automatic. But life doesn't reward perfection on paper. Life rewards preparation, honesty, and consistency. Those three qualities do more for a dream than the most elegant strategy ever could. Preparation sharpens your tools. It strengthens your confidence. It turns hope into capability. When you are prepared, you approach the plan differently. You show up differently. You carry yourself differently. And the world responds to that difference. Honesty keeps you grounded. It prevents you from drifting into fantasy and forces you to deal with reality. It brings clarity to your strengths and exposes the areas where growth is still required. Without honesty, even the best plan becomes a house built on sand. And consistency, well, that's where the magic hides. Not in dramatic efforts or heroic bursts of energy, but in the steady, faithful disciplines repeated long after the excitement fades. Consistency stitches the days together until the results finally appear. It turns small habits into large outcomes. I've watched people cling to their plan as if it were the guarantee. But a plan guarantees nothing. It simply reveals the path. You are the one who must walk it. You are the one who must persist through the storms, adjust to the unexpected, rise after the setbacks, and continue even when progress feels invisible. Every plan will test you, not just your skills, your patience, your character, your resolve. It will ask whether you're willing to trade old habits for new ones. It will ask whether your reason is strong enough to endure the inconvenience of growth. It will ask whether you're serious or merely interested. And somewhere along the way, you'll discover that the goal, as important as it is, becomes secondary to the transformation happening inside. You begin to value the discipline you've built, the courage you've strengthened, the clarity you've earned, the maturity you've developed. These are the real rewards, long before the trophies and treasures arrive. I remember reaching goals I once believed would change everything. And while the results were wonderful, what mattered more was the person I had become in the process. Stronger, wiser, more capable, more intentional. That growth didn't come from the plan itself. It came from the journey required to carry it out. That's the great lesson. A plan doesn't make your life better. You make your life better by becoming the kind of person who can complete the plan. The paper doesn't change you. The practice does. Most plans fail before they begin because people place their faith in the blueprint instead of the builder. But when you focus on preparation, cultivate honesty, and commit to consistency, the plan stands a chance. More than that, you stand a chance. And if you let the process do its work, you won't just reach a destination. You'll rise to a new level of yourself. And that, in the end, is the real victory.